Ever wonder if you can just stop? Stop the 9 to 5, stop the commute, stop the endless cycle of planning for a future that always seems to be just over the horizon. Tom and I wondered that for the better part of 3 decades. Then, one Tuesday, we decided to find out. We sold the house, bought a sturdy but decidedly unglamorous camper van we christened Karen, and traded our predictable lives for the beautiful uncertainty of the open road. Welcome back, fellow adventurers, to another chapter of our life after 50. Today was supposed to be about chasing a postcard. A very specific postcard, in fact. We had it pinned to the little corkboard inside Karen, right next to a grocery list and a faded photo of our kids. The image was of the choiring on the Isle of Skye, that almost mythical landscape of sharp pinnacles and sweeping green valleys that looks like it was sculpted by giants. The plan was simple, a slow, meandering drive up the A87, soaking in the grandeur of the Scottish Highlands, to arrive at the viewpoint just as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of fire and rose. It was the kind of day you plan for weeks, the kind of experience that justifies trading a 4-bedroom house for 70 square feet on wheels. We woke up that morning to the gentle drumming of rain on Karen's roof, a familiar soundtrack to our Scottish adventure. The air outside was thick with the smell of damp earth and pine, a perfume more luxurious than anything we'd ever bought in a department store. I was perched on the edge of our small bed, nursing a mug of tea, watching Tom meticulously wipe down the tiny countertop. It was a ritual for him, a small act of order in our beautifully chaotic life. "You think the clouds will break for us?" I asked, my voice still husky with sleep. He paused, squinting at the sky through the condensation on the window. The forecast said clearing by late afternoon. "It's Scotland, Sarah. If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes," he grinned, that easy, familiar grin that still made my heart do a little flip. "Besides, a little drama in the sky will make the pictures even better." That was Tom. The eternal optimist. 32 years of marriage, and he still believed every cloud had a silver lining, sometimes literally. It was a quality that had once, in our old life, felt a bit naive. Now, out here on the road, it was our most essential piece of equipment, more important than the spare tire or the solar panels. We finished our breakfast of porridge with a dash of local whiskey, a habit we'd picked up and decided was non-negotiable, and began our pre-drive checklist. Water tanks, check. Gas bottle, secure. All cupboards latched, a lesson learned the hard way after a rogue jar of pickles staged a dramatic escape on a winding road in the Cairngorms. Everything was in its place. We were a well-oiled machine, Tom and I. We had our dance, a silent choreography of movement perfected over thousands of miles in this small space. "Ready to chase that sunset, my love?" he asked, sliding into the driver's seat. "Ready as I'll ever be," I replied, buckling myself in and pulling out our well-worn paper map. We had GPS, of course, but there was something romantic and grounding about tracing our route with a fingertip, feeling the texture of the paper, seeing the topography represented in swirling contour lines. It made the journey feel more real, more earned. The first hour of the drive was pure magic. The rain had softened to a fine mist, hanging in the air and clinging to the hulking mountainsides like a ghostly shroud. We drove alongside Loch Cluany, its surface a sheet of hammered pewter under the moody sky. Waterfalls, swollen with the morning's rain, cascaded down the slopes in brilliant white ribbons. We had the road almost entirely to ourselves. It felt like the world had been created just for us, just for this moment. "Can you believe this is our life now?" I murmured, my face pressed against the cool glass of the window. Tom reached over and squeezed my hand. "I can," he said, his voice soft but certain. "This was always our life. We just took a long detour to get here." We fell into a comfortable silence, the only sounds the hum of Karen's diesel engine and the swish of the tires on wet tarmac. This was one of the things I loved most about van life, the shared silence. In our old house, silence could sometimes feel like a void, something that needed to be filled with television or chatter. In the van, it was a companion, a shared space of contentment. The road began to narrow as we pushed further north, transforming into the quintessential single-track lane of the Highlands, with passing places dotted along the way. The landscape grew wilder, more elemental. The mountains were craggier, their peaks lost in the low-hanging clouds. Herds of shaggy highland coos stared at us with placid indifference as we rumbled past, their long horns like something from a fantasy novel. "Okay, I'm pulling over," Tom announced suddenly. Photo opportunity. He eased Karen into a gravel passing place overlooking a vast, empty glen. The mist had lifted slightly, revealing a tapestry of greens and browns, threaded with the silver of a winding river. We stepped out of the van, and the wind immediately snatched at our jackets. It was a wild, clean wind that tasted of rain and distance. We stood there for a long time, not saying a word, just breathing it all in. This was the currency of our new lives. Not money, not possessions, but moments. Moments of profound, soul-stirring beauty that you couldn't capture on a phone, no matter how good the camera was. You had to be there. You had to feel the wind and smell the air. After a while, a little chilled but utterly invigorated, we climbed back into the van. Tom turned the key in the ignition. The engine turned over, coughed, and then, nothing. He tried again. A sad, grinding whir was the only response. "Ha," he said. It was his go-to word for when things were starting to go sideways. Not panic, not yet. Just. "Ha. What's wrong?" I asked, a familiar little knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "I don't know." She was running perfectly fine. He tried the ignition a third time. The whirring sound was weaker now, more pathetic. "Sounds like the battery, but the lights are on." "It shouldn't be the battery." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound now the whistling of the wind outside. The magnificent glen that had seemed so beautiful and romantic moments before now felt vast, empty, and incredibly isolated. We hadn't seen another car for at least 20 minutes. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath and forcing a cheerful tone. "Rule number 1 of van life, don't panic." Tom chuckled, a dry, slightly stressed sound. "I believe rule number 1 is actually, make sure the toilet cassette is empty before driving, but your point is taken." This was the other side of the dream, the part that doesn't make it onto the glossy Instagram feeds. The breakdowns, the uncertainty, the sudden, sharp reminder of just how far you are from a garage or a hot shower. In our old life, a dead car meant a phone call to a roadside assistance service and a mild inconvenience. Out here, it was a different beast entirely. It was a test. "Right then," Tom said, clapping his hands together with a burst of forced energy. "Let's go through the basics. You check the manual for the fuse box layout. I'll look at the engine." He said, "Look at the engine," in the way a person might say, "I'll perform open-heart surgery with a butter knife." Neither of us was mechanically inclined. Tom's greatest automotive achievement to date had been successfully changing a windshield wiper. He popped the bonnet, and we both peered into the bewildering tangle of pipes, wires, and greasy metal components. It was like looking at the entrails of a complex alien creature. "See anything?" I asked, knowing full well the answer. "Yep," he said, pointing vaguely. "It's an engine, all right." "Looks, engine Y." I couldn't help but laugh. The tension broke, just for a second. That was us. Even in a minor crisis, we could find the absurdity. He poked a hose gingerly, as if it might bite him. It didn't. Nothing happened. The engine remained stubbornly, resolutely silent. "Okay, plan B," I said, closing the ridiculously heavy owner's manual. "We wait for a car to pass." So we waited. The minutes stretched into an hour. The dramatic sky that Tom had been so excited about began to look more and more ominous. The clouds thickened, and a steady, persistent drizzle began to fall. We retreated into the van, making a pot of tea on our little gas hob. The simple act of boiling water felt like a small victory, a tiny pocket of domesticity in the face of the wild. "You know," Tom said, staring out at the rain-streaked window, "if this were a movie, a rugged, handsome Scottish farmer would appear out of the mist any second now on a white horse. And he'd know exactly how to fix a diesel fuel pump with nothing but a piece of tartan and a firm word." I added. "Exactly. And he'd probably offer us a dram of his family's ancient, secret recipe whiskey." We sipped our tea, spinning out the fantasy. It was better than sitting in worried silence. But as the afternoon wore on, the reality of our situation started to sink in. Our postcard sunset at the Quiring was slipping away with every passing minute. Disappointment, sharp and unwelcome, began to creep in. Just as we were starting to seriously contemplate spending the night right there in that passing place, we saw it. A pair of headlights, cutting through the gray afternoon. It was an old, battered Land Rover, the kind that looked like it had been wrestling with the landscape its entire life and had mostly won. Tom leaped out of the van, waving his arms like a man trying to flag a rescue plane. The Land Rover slowed and pulled up alongside us. The window rolled down with a squeal of protest, revealing a man who looked as weathered and resilient as his vehicle. He had a craggy face, a thick gray beard, and eyes the color of the stormy sky. "Trouble?" he asked, his accent a wonderful, rolling burr. "I'm afraid so," Tom said, launching into an explanation of the non-starting engine. The man listened patiently, nodding. She's no happy," he said, a masterpiece of understatement. He got out of his truck and came over to peer at our engine. Unlike us, he seemed to know what he was looking at. He grunted, prodded a few things with a confidence we could only dream of, and then stood back, wiping his oily hands on an already stained rag. "Well, I'm no mechanic," he announced, which was a bit disheartening. "But it's the battery. Could be the starter motor, could be the alternator. Could be 100 bloody things on these newfangled vans." My heart sank a little. "But," he continued, a twinkle appearing in his gray eyes, "I know a man who is a mechanic. A proper one. Angus MacLeod. He's in Shielbridge, about 15 miles up the road. A wee wizard with engines, is Angus." Relief washed over me so intensely it was almost dizzying. "The problem is," the man added, scratching his beard, "there's no phone signal out here to call him." Of course there wasn't. The universe, it seemed, had a flair for dramatic tension. "Here's what we'll do," he said, making a decision. "I'm heading that way. I'll stop in at his garage and tell him about you. He'll come out when he can. Might be an hour, might be 2. Depends if he's in the middle of a tractor." We tried to offer him money, for his time, for his trouble, but he just waved it away with a dismissive hand. "Och, away with ye. We look after folks out here. Just pay it forward sometime." He gave us a final nod. "His name's Angus. He drives a blue Transit. Just sit tight." And with that, he climbed back into his Land Rover, gave a toot of the horn, and rumbled off down the road, leaving us once again in the quiet embrace of the glen. "What was his name?" I asked Tom as he got back into the van, dripping with rain but beaming. "I have no idea," he replied. I was so relieved I completely forgot to ask. So there we were, pinning our hopes on an unnamed stranger and a mechanic named Angus who might or might not be wrestling with a tractor. The Quiring was now officially off the table for today. The disappointment was real, a dull ache in my chest. We had planned this day so carefully. It was meant to be a highlight, a jewel in the crown of our Scottish tour. "Well," I said with a sigh, "this wasn't on the itinerary." "No," Tom agreed, putting the kettle back on. "But it's part of the story now." We settled in for another wait. The rain became heavier, hammering on the roof. We read our books, did a crossword puzzle, and watched the light begin to fade outside. The vibrant greens of the glen slowly deepened to a murky, brooding gray. It felt like we were the only two people left in the world, sealed inside our little metal box. It was in these moments that our decision to embark on this life was truly tested. It wasn't about the sunny days and the perfect views. It was about this. It was about sitting in a broken-down van in the middle of nowhere, with no phone signal, as darkness fell, and not letting the fear or frustration win. It was about looking at the person sitting opposite you and knowing, with absolute certainty, that you were in it together. "I wouldn't want to be stuck here with anyone else," I said quietly. Tom looked up from his book and smiled. "Me neither." Though our rugged, handsome farmer would have been a close second. Just as true darkness was about to claim the last of the day, we saw another pair of headlights. A blue transit van, just as our nameless savior had promised. It pulled up behind Karen, and a man in greasy blue overalls hopped out. He was shorter than I'd imagined, wiry and spry, with a shock of white hair that defied gravity and a face that looked like it had been perpetually squinting into engines. This had to be Angus. "The Fiat Ducato that's decided to take an unscheduled holiday?" he asked, his voice surprisingly cheerful. "That's us," Tom said, relief evident in his voice. "You must be Angus." "The one and only," he chirped. "Let's have a look at the patient." What followed was a masterclass in quiet competence. Angus moved with an economy and precision that was beautiful to watch. He had a small toolbox that seemed to contain a magical, endless supply of the exact right tool for every situation. He didn't poke and guess like we had. He listened, he tested, he diagnosed. He said after about 10 minutes of methodical investigation under the bonnet, a small torch held between his teeth. "It's your starter motor. She's given up the ghost. Can you fix it?" I asked, trying to keep the hope out of my voice. Angus looked up at me, his face illuminated from below by the torchlight, making him look like a friendly gremlin. "Can a duck swim?" "Of course I can fix it. Good thing for you, I've got a reconditioned one back at the garage that'll fit this engine. Had a delivery van in with the same problem last week." The sheer, dumb luck of it was staggering. "The bad news is," he continued, "the garage is back in Shield Bridge. And it's getting dark. And this is a terrible place to be doing this kind of work." He straightened up, rubbing his lower back. The wind howled around us, and the rain, which had briefly subsided, started up again with renewed vigor. I could see his point. Performing mechanical surgery on the side of a narrow, windswept road in the dark and the rain did not seem ideal. "So, what happens now?" Tom asked. "Do we need a tow?" Angus looked at our van, then at his own, then at the darkening sky. He seemed to be doing some complex calculation in his head. "A tow will cost you a fortune. And you'll have to wait till morning." "No. I'll go back, get the part, and I'll come back and fix it. Right here." We were floored by his dedication. "Are you sure?" I asked. "We can wait until tomorrow." "Nah," he said, waving a hand. "You'll be wanting to get on your way. And frankly, my wife's making stew tonight, and I don't want to miss it. The faster I fix this, the faster I get my dinner," he grinned. "Give me 2 hours. Don't go anywhere." He hopped back in his van and disappeared into the night, leaving us with a renewed sense of hope and a deep admiration for the kindness of strangers in the Highlands. 2 hours later, almost to the minute, his headlights reappeared. He returned not just with the starter motor, but with a flask of hot, sweet tea and a bag of shortbread from his wife. "She said you'd be needing it," he explained, handing it to me. I could have cried. Here we were, a complete inconvenience, and this man and his wife were treating us like neighbors. The repair itself was an incredible performance. Angus lay on a piece of cardboard on the wet ground under our van, illuminated by a work lamp powered by his own van's battery. Tom held a second torch for him, trying his best to be useful. I stood by with the flask, acting as official tea pourer and morale officer. Angus kept up a running commentary from beneath Karen. He told us about his kids who had moved to Glasgow, about the prize-winning leeks he grew in his garden, about the time he had to fix a generator for a film crew that was shooting a movie up in the hills. He complained about modern engines and their plastic covers, and praised the simple, honest engineering of his old Land Rover. It wasn't just a repair. It was a conversation. It was a connection. We were no longer just stranded tourists, we were part of a little tableau, a moment of shared human experience on a dark and stormy night. The grand, epic view of the choiring had been replaced by this, the small, focused view of a good man, working with his hands, helping strangers because it was the right thing to do. After what felt like an eternity of grunting, clanking, and the occasional muttered curse from under the van, Angus slid out, covered in grease but triumphant. "Right," he said, getting to his feet with a groan. "Give her a try now." Tom climbed into the driver's seat, his face a mask of nervous anticipation. He turned the key. There was a moment of silence, and then, with a healthy, confident roar, Karen's engine sprang to life. The three of us broke into spontaneous cheers. Tom pumped his fist in the air. I let out a whoop of pure joy. Angus just smiled, a quiet, satisfied smile. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. We paid him, of course, insisting on adding a hefty amount on top for the late-night call-out and the sheer inconvenience. He protested, but we insisted. It felt like a ridiculously small price to pay for the rescue he had performed. "Well," he said, packing his tools away. "She should see you right now. Take care on the roads." He gave us a final wave and drove off, his blue van's taillights shrinking into the darkness until they were gone. And then, silence. A different kind of silence this time. Not the anxious silence of being broken down, but the peaceful silence of resolution. The rain had finally stopped, and through a break in the clouds, a few stars were beginning to appear. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night. We were exhausted, a little grubby, and still in the same passing place we'd pulled into 8 hours earlier. "I guess we're camping here tonight," Tom said, shutting off the engine. "I guess so," I replied. The most scenic lay-by in all of Scotland. We made a simple dinner of pasta and pesto, too tired for anything more elaborate. We ate sitting on the step of the van, wrapped in blankets against the cold night air. The clouds had cleared completely now, revealing a breathtaking canopy of stars. With no light pollution for miles, the Milky Way was a brilliant, shimmering smear across the inky blackness. It was a view we would never have seen from a designated campsite. It was a view we had earned. "You know," Tom said, breaking the comfortable silence, "this wasn't the day we planned." "Not even close," I said, smiling. "But," he continued, looking up at the sky, "I don't think I'd trade it." And I knew exactly what he meant. We hadn't gotten our postcard picture. We hadn't seen the sun set over the choiring. But what we got instead was so much more valuable. We got the story. We got the kindness of the unnamed man in the Land Rover. We got to meet Angus MacLeod, the engine wizard and stew enthusiast. We got to see our partnership work, to face a challenge and come out the other side, stronger and more connected. We had set out that morning to see a scenic stop. And we did. It just wasn't the one on the map. Our scenic stop was a gravel passing place on the A87. It was the intricate dance of a master mechanic's hands. It was the taste of hot, sweet tea given in kindness. It was the roar of an engine coming back to life. It was the profound, humbling beauty of a star-filled sky that you only get to see when your plans fall apart. This is the truth of van life, the secret that lies beneath all the beautiful photos of sunsets and mountains. It's not about avoiding the problems. It's about what you discover when you're forced to solve them. In our old life, a day like this would have been a disaster. A stressful, expensive, ruined day. We would have focused on what was lost, the plan, the reservation, the experience we were supposed to have. But out here, your perspective shifts. The journey isn't a straight line from A to B. It's a messy, beautiful, unpredictable scribble. And the most memorable moments are often found in the detours. The breakdowns are as much a part of the adventure as the breakthroughs. As we tidied up and prepared for bed, I took the postcard of the choiring down from our corkboard. I looked at the perfect, dramatic image. And then I turned it over and wrote on the back, A87 passing place. The day Karen met Angus. The day we saw the stars. I pinned it back up, the blank side facing out. A new kind of postcard. Tomorrow, we would drive to the choiring. We would see its magnificent cliffs and take our pictures. But I knew, with a deep and happy certainty, that when we looked back on our time in Scotland, it wouldn't be the famous viewpoint we'd talk about most. It would be the story of the breakdown. The story of the kindness of strangers. The story of how a plan gone wrong turned into a perfect, unforgettable day. We climbed into bed, the familiar comfort of our little home on wheels enveloping us. The engine was fixed, our bellies were full, and we were together. That's all that really mattered. Thanks for joining us on this little detour. We hope it reminds you that sometimes the best adventures are the ones you never planned. Join us next time as we continue to live fully, 1 mile, and one unexpected story, at a time.